Testing, testing, testing. Can you get sound on your camera or your phone? You getting sound on your phone, Liza? Are you getting sound on your phone? Are you hearing this on your phone? Testing, testing. It'll be late. It's probably 10 or 15 seconds delayed. Okay.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. All right, you guys, we're going to start. So just take this moment, please, to turn your cell phones off. It's so distracting to the actors. No flash photography, you know. So we're going to start with Dharmadas.
So I'm not really part of the entertainment, although I will say that it is in the finest Ananda tradition to have something fun after lunch. So that's what this is about to be. But this is Thanksgiving, and it's a wonderful day to be thankful. And one of the things I'm thankful for is spiritual family. And you all represent that and many more, but you all are the ones who are here. So it's wonderful to be together. I'll just share one thought that came to me when we were on a pilgrimage recently in Italy. And you see all these angels in all these incredible paintings and artwork, statuary, and so forth. And they're all praising God. And I have to confess that from childhood, I was always a little confused by the concept of praising God. And the thought struck me that they're just saying thank you. That's as simple as that. You know, it's like, thank you, Lord. You know, Swami wrote a whole song, Well Done, Lord. And it's just a hermit who's saying, thank you for the sunshine, and thank you for the beauty around us, and thank you for the joy of a child, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, it's a wonderful day to say thank you to all our dear ones, and it's also a wonderful day to say thank you to God. Okay.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with P.G. Wodehouse, he was someone that Swami Kriyananda got us interested in. His stories, he was a writer in the turn of the century, and he was a banker initially. And he had the opportunity then to study all the rich people that would come in, and the reason Swami got us into him was because he didn't just make fun of rich people, he made fun of everybody. And he was extremely absurd. And so it takes a little getting used to, because he is a kind of an intellectual writer, and Swami was a very high intellect, so you really have to listen to a lot of what he says, but once you catch on, you'll see that he's really is delightful. And his humor is not something that condemns society as much as laughs with it. And he often wrote of the young man who was rich and didn't have any need to work, and basically spent time worrying about his love life. And so you could say he kind of wrote about the young and the useless. You know, they were not of the highest caliber in terms of. So he realized he was a banker, so he had this opportunity, as writers do, to see, to observe. And so what he realized was that he could actually make more money writing. So that's when he left banking. And he was also raised by ants. And so you'll often hear about ants throughout all of his writings. And so this particular production tonight is called The Reverent Wooing of Archibald. And I will say it's the very first thing I ever did with Ananda, and it's what got me turned on to P.G. Wodehouse. To me, it's one of the funniest ones that he's done. But you're going to hear a couple of references. And one of them is to Francis Bacon. And for those who don't know who he was a scientist, and he was a philosopher, and he was back in the 17th century. And he had I can't really, because it's not my field, I can't really explain who he really was, but I do know enough to say that he had a certain amount of, he did a code. He had a code. And if you think about numerology and how you get numbers and you correspond them to different letters, and then you kind of can tell somebody's life because of that. So he had a particular code. And there were people at the time, when P.G. Wodehouse was writing, as well as maybe today, I don't know, there could still be what they call Baconians, who believed that there was a secret code in Shakespeare's writings that actually said that it was Francis Bacon who wrote his stuff, not Shakespeare, because they felt that Shakespeare did not have the background, the cultural background to write such sophisticated material, and that Bacon and a lot of his philosophies were tied in. They corresponded to a lot of Shakespeare's philosophies. So you're going to hear reference to that. But bottom line, what this play is about, and I have been told time and again by my fellow actor to mention this, which is that the spiritual edge of this is that it's about being your authentic self. And everyone can relate to this when you see this. Okay? So we're going to start. So this is The Reverent Wooing of Archibald. Sitting in the corner by the window remarked that it was strange how types die out.
I can remember the days when every other girl you met stood about 6'2" in her dancing shoes and had as many curves as a scenic railway. Now they're all 5'0" and you can't see them sideways. What is this?
The drought stout shook his head.
Nobody can say. It's the same with dogs. One moment the world is full of pugs as far as the eye can reach. The next, not a pug in sight, only peaks and Alsatians. Odd.
The small Baskin double whiskey and splash admitted that these things were very mysterious and supposed we should never know the reason for them. Probably we were not meant to know. I cannot agree with you, gentlemen,
said Mr. Mulliner.
The reason for the disappearance of the dignified, queenly type of girl is surely obvious. It is nature's method of ensuring that the continuance of the species. A world full of the sort of young woman like Meredith used to put into his novels and Dumouriez into his pictures in Punch would be a world full of permanent spinsters. The modern young man would never be able to summon up the nerve to propose to them.
There's something in that.
I speak with authority on the point because my nephew, Archibald, made me his confidant when he fell in love with Aurelia Camerlet. He worshipped that girl with a fervor which threatened to unseat his reasons, such as it was. But the mere idea of asking her to be his wife gave him, he informed me, such a feeling of faintness that only by means of a very stiff brandy and soda or some similar restorative was he able to pull himself together on the occasion when he contemplated it. Had it not been for, but perhaps you would care to hear the story from the beginning. People who enjoyed a merely superficial acquaintance with my nephew Archibald were accustomed to set him down as just an ordinary pin-headed young man. It was only when they came to know him better that they discovered their mistake. Then they realized that his pin-headedness, so far from being ordinary, was exceptional. Even at the Drones Club, where the average of intellect is not high, it was often said of Archibald that had his brain been constructed of silk, he would have been hard put to find sufficient material to make a canary a pair of stockings. He sauntered through life with a cheerful insouciance, and up to the age of 25 had only once been moved by anything in the nature of a really strong emotion, on the occasion when in the heart of Bond Street and at the height of the London season, he discovered that his man Meadows had carelessly sent him out with odd spats on. And then he met Aurelia Camerlet.
The first encounter between the two has always seemed to me to bear an extraordinary resemblance to the famous meeting between the poet Dante and Beatrice Portinari. Dante, if you remember, exchanged no remarks with Beatrice on that occasion, nor did Archibald with Aurelia. Dante just goggled at the girl. So did Archibald. Like Archibald, Dante loved at first sight, and the poet's age at the time we were told, 9, which was almost exactly the mental age of Archibald Mulliner when he first set eyeglass on Aurelia Camerlet. Only in the actual locale of the encounter do the two cases cease to be parallel. Dante, the story relates, was walking on the Ponte Vecchio while Archibald Mulliner was having a thoughtful cocktail in the window of the Drones Club, looking over on the Dover Street. And he had just relaxed his lower jaw in order to examine Dover Street more comfortably when there swam into his line of vision something that looked like a Greek goddess who, contrary to the usual practice of Greek goddesses, had had time to put clothes on. She came out of a shop opposite the club and stood on the pavement waiting for a taxi. And as he saw her standing there, love at first sight seemed to go all over Archibald Mulliner like the nettle rash. It was strange that this should have been so, for she was not at all the sort of girl with whom Archibald had fallen in love at first sight in the past. I chanced, while in here the other day, to pick up a copy of one of those old yellow novels of 50 years ago, the property, I believe, of Miss Postlethwaite, a courteous and erudite barmaid. It was entitled Sir Ralph is a Secret, and its heroine, the Lady Elaine, was described as a superbly handsome girl, divinely tall, with a noble figure, the arched Montresor nose, haughty eyes beneath delicately penciled brows, and that indefinable air of aristocratic aloofness which marks the daughter of 100 earls. And Aurelia Camerley might have been this formidable creature's double.
Yet Archibald, sighting her, reeled as if the cocktail he had just consumed had been his 10th instead of his first.
Golly!
To save himself from falling, he had clutched a passerbying fellow member and now examined his catch. He saw that it was young Algy Wimintum, and just the fellow member he would have preferred to clutch at, for Algy was a man who went everywhere and knew everybody and could doubtless give him the information he needed.
Algy, old prune, a moment of your valuable time, if you don't mind.
He paused, for he had perceived his need for caution. Algy was a notorious babbler, and it would be at the height of restlessness to give him an inkling of the passion which blazed within his breast. With a strong effort, he donned the mask, and when he spoke again, it was with a deceiving nonchalance.
I was just wondering if you happen to know who that girl is across the street there. Seems to me I've met her somewhere or something, or seen her or something, or something, if you know what I mean.
Algy followed his pointing finger and was in time to observe Aurelia as she disappeared into the cab.
That girl?
Yes. Oh, who is she, if any?
A girl named Camerley.
Then I haven't met her.
Introduce you if you like. She's sure to be at Oscott. Look out for us there.
Oh, all right, I'll try to remember. Tell me about her. I mean, has she any fathers or mothers or any rot of that description?
Only an aunt. She lives with her in Park Street. She's potty.
Potty? That divine? I mean, that rather attractive-looking girl?
Not Aurelia. The aunt. She thinks Bacon wrote Shakespeare.
Thinks who wrote what?
You must have heard of Shakespeare. He's well known. Fellow who used to write plays. Only Aurelia's aunt says he didn't. He maintains that a bloke called Bacon wrote them for him.
Dashed decent of him. Of course, he may have owed Shakespeare money.
Oh, there's that, of course.
What was that name again?
Bacon.
Bacon, right.
Algy moved on, and Archibald, his soul bubbling within him like a Welsh rabbit at the height of the fever, sank into a chair and stared sightlessly at the ceiling, and then rising, he went off to the Burlington Arcade to buy socks. The process of buying socks eased for a while the turmoil that ran riot in Archibald's veins, but even socks with clocks can only alleviate, they do not cure. Returning to his rooms, he found the anguish rather more overwhelming than ever, for at last he had leisure to think, and thinking always hurt his head. Algy's careless words had confined his worst suspicions. A girl with an aunt who knew all about Shakespeare and Bacon must of necessity live in a mental atmosphere into which a lame-brained bird like himself could scarcely hope to soar, even if he did meet her, even if she asked him to call, even if in due time their relations became positively cordial. What then? How could he aspire to such a goddess? What had he to offer her?
Money? Plenty of that, yes. But what is money? Socks? Of these I have the finest collection in London, but socks are not everything. A loving heart, fat lot of use that is.
No, a girl like Aurelia Camerley would, he felt, demand from the man who aspired to her hand something in the nature of gifts, of accomplishments.
He would have to be a man who did things. And what, I asked myself, can I do? Absolutely nothing except
Give an imitation of a hen laying an egg.
That he could do. At imitating a hen, laying an egg, he was admittedly a master. His fame in that one respect had spread all over the West End of London. Others abide our question. Thou art free, was the verdict of London's gilded youth on Archibald Mulliner when considered purely in the light of a man who could imitate a hen laying an egg. Mulliner, yeah, they may be a pretty total loss in many ways,
But he can imitate a hen laying an egg.
And so far from helping him, this one accomplishment of his would, reason told him, be a positive handicap. A girl like Aurelia Cummerleg would simply be sickened by such coarse buffoonery. He blushed at the very thought of her ever learning that he was capable of sinking to such depths. And so, when some weeks later he was introduced to her at the paddock at Ascot, he and she, gazing at him with what seemed to his sensitive mind contemptuous loathing, said,
They tell me you give an imitation of a hen laying an egg, Mr. Mulliner.
Oh, it's a lie, a foul and contemptible lie, which I shall track to its source and nail to the counter.
Brave words! But had they clicked? Had she believed him? He trusted so, but her haughty eyes were very penetrating. They seemed to pierce through the depths of his soul and lay it bare for what it was, the soul of a hen imitator. However, she did ask him to call, with a sort of queenly, bored disdain, and only after he had asked twice if he might. But she did it, and Archibald resolved that no matter what the mental strain, he would show her that her first impression of him had been erroneous, that trivial and vapid though he might have seen, there were in his nature deeps whose existence she had not suspected.
For a young man who'd been kicked out from Eton and believed everything he read in the racing experts column in the morning paper, Archibald, I am bound to admit, exhibited in this crisis a sagacity for which few of his intimates would have given him credit. It may be that love stimulates the mind, or it may be that when the moment comes, blood will tell. Archibald, you must remember, was after all a Mulliner, and now the old resourceful strain of the Mulliners came out in him.
Meadows,
Sir,
it appears that there is, or was, a cove of the name of Shakespeare. Also a second cove by the name of Bacon. And Bacon wrote plays, it seems, and Shakespeare went and put his name on them and the program and copped all the credit.
indeed, sir.
If true, not right, Meadows.
Oh, far from it, sir.
Very well, then. I wish to go into this matter carefully. Kindly pop out and get me a book or two on the business.
Yes, sir. He had planned this campaign with infinite cunning. He knew that before anything could be done in the direction of winning the heart of Aurelia Cummerleg, he must first establish himself solidly with the aunt. He must court the aunt, ingratiate himself with her.
Always, of course, making it clear from the start that she is not the one. And if reading about Shakespeare and Bacon can do it, I'll have her eating out of my hand in a week.
Meadows returned with a parcel of forbidding-looking volumes, and Archibald put in a fortnight's intensive study. Then, discarding the monocle, which had up till this been his constant companion, and substituting for it a pair of horn-rimmed spectacles which gave him something of the look of an earnest sheep, he set out for Park Street to pay his first call. And within 5 minutes of his arrival, he had declined a cigarette on the plea that he was a non-smoker, and had managed to say some rather caustic things about the practice so prevalent among his contemporaries of drinking cocktails.
Life was surely given to us for some better purpose than the destruction of our brains and digestion with alcohol. Bacon, for instance, never took a cocktail in his life, and well, look at him.
At this, the aunt, who till now had plainly been regarding him as just another of those unfortunate incidents, sprang to life.
You admire bacon, Mr. Mulliner?
And reaching out an arm like the tentacle of an octopus, she drew him into a corner and talked about cryptograms for 47 minutes by the drawing room clock. In short, to sum the thing up, my nephew Archibald, at his initial meeting with the only relative of the girl he loved, went like a breeze. A Mulliner is always a Mulliner. Apply the acid test, and he will meet it. It was not long after this that he informed me that he had sown the good seed to such an extent that Aurelia's aunt had invited him to pay a long visit to her country house, Brosted Towers in Sussex. He was seated at the Savoy bar when he told me this, rather feverishly putting himself out of a scotch and soda, and I was perplexed to note that his face was drawn and his eyes haggard. But you do not seem happy, my boy.
I am not happy.
Oh, but surely this should be an occasion for rejoicing. Thrown together as you will be in the pleasant surroundings of a country house, you ought easily to find an opportunity of asking this girl to marry you.
And a lot of good that will be. Even if I do get a chance, I shan't be able to make any use of it. I wouldn't have the nerve. You don't seem to realize what it means being in love with a girl like Aurelia. When I look into those clear, soulful eyes, or see the perfect profile bobbing about on the horizon, I get a sense of my unworthiness that seems to slosh me amidships like some blunt instrument. My tongue gets entangled with my front teeth, and all I can do is stand there feeling like a piece of gorgonzola that has been condemned by the local sanitary inspector. I'm going to Brosted Towers, yes, but I don't expect anything to come of it. I know exactly what's going to happen to me. I shall just buzz along through life, pining dumbly, and in the end slide into the tomb of a blasted, blighted bachelor. Another whiskey, please, and jolly well make it a double.
Brosted Towers, situated as it is in the pleasant weald of Sussex, stands some 50 miles from London, and Archibald, taking the trip easily in his car, arrived there in time to dress comfortably for dinner. It was only when he reached the drawing room at 8 o'clock that he discovered that the younger members of the house party had gone off in a body to dine and dance at a hospitable neighbor's, leaving him to waste the evening tie of a lifetime to the composition of which he had devoted no less than 22 minutes on Aurelia's aunt. Dinner in these circumstances could hardly hope to be an unmixedly exhilarating function. Among the things which helped to differentiate it from a Babylonian orgy was the fact that, in deference to his known prejudice, no wine was served to Archibald. And lacking artificial stimulus, he found the aunt even harder to endure philosophically than ever. Archibald had long since come to a definite decision that
What this woman needs is an ounce of weed killer, scientifically administered.
with a good deal of adroitness, he contrived to head her off from her favorite topic during the meal, but after the coffee had been disposed of, she threw off all restraint. Scooping him up and bearing him off into the recesses of the west wing, she wedged him into a corner of a settee and began to tell him all about the remarkable discovery which had been made by applying the plain cipher to Milton's well-known epitaph on
The one
Shakespeare.
beginning with, what needs my Shakespeare for his honoured bones?
Oh, that one?
What needs Is my Shakespeare for his honored bones the labor of an age in pilot stones, or that his hallowed relics should be hid under a starry-pointed pyramid?
I don't know.
As in the plays and sonnets, we substitute the name of the equivalent of the figure totals.
We do what?
Substitute the name equivalents of the figure totals.
The which?
The figure totals.
Oh, all right, let it go. I dare say you know best.
The aunt inflated her lungs.
These figure totals are always taken out in the plain cipher, A equaling 1 to Z equals 24. The names are counted in the same way. A capital letter with the figures indicates an occasion variation in the name count. For instance, A equals 27, B 28, and K equals 10 is reached. And K, instead of 10, becomes 1. And T, instead of 19, is 1. And R, and reverse, and so on, until A equals 24 is reached. The short or single digit is not used here. Reading the epitaph in light of the cipher, it becomes, what needs verulam for Shakespeare? Francis Bacon, England's king, he hid under a W. Shakespeare. William Shakespeare. Fame. What needs Francis Tudor? King of England. Francis W. Shakespeare. For Francis, thy William Shakespeare hath England's king took W. Shakespeare. Then thou art W. Shakespeare, Francis Tudor, bereaving Francis Bacon, Francis Tudor, such a doom. William Shakespeare.
The speech to which we had been listening was unusually lucid and simple for a Baconian. Yet Archibald, his eye catching a battle axe that hung on the wall, could not but stifle a wistful sigh. How simple it would have been had he not been a mulliner and a gentleman to remove the weapon from its hook, spit on his hands, and haul off and dot this doddering old ruin, one just above the imitation pearl necklace. Placing his twitching hands underneath him and sitting on them, he stayed where he was just as the clock on the mantelpiece chimed the hour of midnight, a merciful fit of hiccups on the part of his hostess enabled him to retire. As he reached the 27th, his fingers found the door handle, and a moment later he was outside, streaking up the stairs. The room with which they'd given Archibald was at the end of a corridor, a pleasant, airy apartment with French windows opening upon a broad balcony. At any other time, he would have found it agreeable to hop out onto this balcony and revel in the scents and sounds of the summer night, thinking the while long, lingering thoughts of Aurelia. But what with all that Francis Tudor, Francis Bacon, such a tomb, William Shakespeare, Count 17, drop one knit pearl, and set them up in the other alley stuff, not even thoughts of Aurelia could keep him from his bed. Moodily tearing off his clothes and donning his pajamas, Archibald Mulliner climbed in and instantaneously discovered that the bed was an apple pie bed. When and how it had happened, he did not know, but at a point during the day, some loving hand had sewn up the sheets and put 2 hairbrushes and a branch of some prickly shrub between them. Himself from earliest boyhood an adept at the construction of booby traps, Archibald, had his frame of mind been sunnier, would doubtless have greeted this really extremely sound effort with a cheery laugh. As it was, weighed down with verulam's and Francis Tudor's, he swore for a while with considerable fervor, and ripping off the sheets and tossing the prickly shrub wearily into a corner, he crawled between the blankets and was soon asleep. His last waking thought was that if the aunt hoped to catch him on the morrow, she would have to be considerably quicker on her pins than her physique indicated.
How long I slept I could not say. I woke some hours later with a vague feeling that a thunderstorm of unusual violence had broken out in the immediate neighborhood. But this I realized as the mists of slumber cleared away was an error. The noise which had disturbed me was not thunder, but the sound of someone snoring. Snoring like the Dickens. The walls seemed to be vibrating like the deck of an ocean liner. Now, I had had a tough evening with the aunt, but my spirit was not so completely broken as to make me lie supinely down beneath that snoring. The sound filled me as snoring fills every right-thinking man, with a seething resentment and a passionate yearning for justice. And I climbed out of bed with the intention of taking the proper steps through the recognized channels. It is the custom nowadays to disparage the educational methods of the English public school and to maintain that they are not practical and of a kind to fit the growing boy for the problems of life. But you do learn one thing in a public school, and that is how to act when somebody starts snoring. You jolly well grab a cake of soap and you pop it in and stuff it down the blighter's throat. All I have to do is dash to the washstand and arm myself. I move softly out through the French windows onto the balcony. The snoring proceeded from the very next room. Presumably, this room would also have French windows, and presumably, as the night is warm, these will be open. It will be a simple task to oil in, insert the soap, and buzz back undetected. It was a lovely night, but I paid no attention to it. Clasping the cake of soap, I crept on and was pleased to discover, on arriving outside the snorer's room, that my surmise had been correct. The windows were open. Beyond them, screening the interior of the room, were heavy curtains, and I had just placed my hand upon these when from inside a voice spoke, and at the same time the light was turned on.
Who's that?
And it was as at Brosted Towers, with all its stabling and outhouses and massages, all had fallen on Archibald's head. A mist rose before his eyes. He gasped and tottered. The voice was that of Aurelia Camerley.
For an instant, for a single, long, sickening instant, I am compelled to admit that my love, deep as the sea though it was, is definitely wobbling. It had received a grievous blow. It was not simply the discovery that the girl I adored was a snorer that unmanned me. It was the thought that she could snore like that. There was something about those snores that had seemed to sin against my whole conception of womanly purity. So eloquent they were of adenoids that should have been removed in infancy, and tonsils that ought never to have been allowed to remain untended.
Oh. Then he recovered, and after that his girl slumber was not, as the poet Milton so beautifully puts it, airy light, but rather reminiscent of a lumber camp when the wood sawing is proceeding at its briskest. He loved her still. He had just reached this conclusion when a second voice spoke inside the room.
I say, Aurelia.
It was the voice of another girl.
I perceive now that the question
Who's that?
had been addressed not to me, but to this newcomer fumbling at the door handle.
I say, Aurelia, you simply got to do something about that bally bulldog of yours. I can't get to sleep with him snoring like that. He's making the plaster come down from the ceiling in my room.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got so used to it that I didn't notice.
Well, I do. Put a green baize cloth over him or something.
Out on the moonlight balcony, Archibald Mulliner stood shaking like a pudding. And although he had contrived to maintain his great love particularly or practically intact when he had supposed the snores to proceed from the girl he worshipped, It had been tough going, and for an instant, as we have said, a very near thing. The relief that swept over him at the discovery that Aurelia could still justifiably remain on her pinnacles was so profound that it made him feel filleted. He seemed for a moment in a daze, and then he was brought out by the ether by hearing his name spoken.
Did Archie Mulliner arrive tonight?
I suppose so. He wired in that he was motoring down.
Oh, just between us girls, what do you think of that bird?
Well, to listen into a private conversation, especially a private conversation between two modern girls when you never know what may come next, is rightly considered an action incompatible with the claim to be a gentleman. I regret to say, therefore, that Archibald, ignoring the fact that he belonged to a family whose code is as high as any of that in the land, instead of creeping away to his room, edged at this point a step closer to the curtains and stood there with his ears flapping. It might be an ignoble thing to eavesdrop, but it was apparent that Aurelia Camille was about to reveal her candid opinion of him, and the prospect of getting the true facts straight, as it were, from the horse's mouth, held him so fascinated that he could not move. Archie Mulliner?
Yes. The betting at the junior lipstick is 7-2 that you'll marry him.
Oh, why on earth?
Well, people have noticed he's always round at your place, and they do seem to think it's significant. Anyway, that's how the odds stood when I left London. 7-2.
Well, get in on the short end, and you'll make a packet.
Is it official?
Absolutely.
Oh.
Yes. Out in the moonlight, Archibald Mulliner uttered a low, bleak moan rather than that last wind going out of a dying duck. True, he had always told himself that he hadn't a chance, but however much a man may say that, he never in his heart really believes it. And now, from an authoritative source, he had learned that his romance was definitely blue around the edges. It was a shattering blow. He wondered dully how the trains ran to the Rocky Mountains. A spot of grizzly bear shooting seemed indicated. Inside the room, the other girl appeared perplexed.
But you told me at Ascot that just after he introduced you, you rather thought you and had last met your ideal. When did the good thing become unstuck?
Oh, I did think so then. Well, there was something about him. I liked the way his ears wiggled, and I'd always heard that he was such a perfectly genial, cherry-merry old soul. Algy Wymondham told me that his imitation of a hen laying an egg was alone enough to keep a reasonable girl happy through a long married life.
Can he imitate a hen?
No! I asked him, and he stoutly denied that he'd ever done such a thing in his life. He was quite stuffy about it. I felt a little uneasy, and then the moment he started calling and hanging about the house, I knew that my fears had been well-founded. The man is beyond question a flat tire and a wet smack.
As bad as that?
Oh, I'm not exaggerating a bit. Where people get the idea that Archie Mulliner is a venomous old bean beats me. He's the world's worst monkey wrench. He doesn't drink cocktails. He doesn't smoke cigarettes. And the thing he seems to enjoy most in the world is to sit for hours listening to the conversation of my aunt, who, as you know, is pure goof from the soles of her feet to the tortoiseshell comb, and should long ago have been renting a padded cell in Elswood. Oh, believe me, Mariel, if you can really get 7-2, you are on to the best thing since Buttercup won Lincolnshire.
You don't say.
I do say. And apart from anything else, he's got a beastly habit of looking at me reverently. And if you know how sick I am of being looked at reverently, they will do it, these lads. I suppose it's because I'm rather an outsize and modeled along the lines of Cleopatra.
Tough.
Oh, you bet it's tough. A girl can't help her appearance. Now, I may look as if my ideal man was the hero of Avini's operetta, but I don't feel that way.
Oh, what I want is some good sprightly sportsman who sets a nice booby trap and who'll rush up and grab me in his arms and say to me, Aurelia, old girl, you're the bee's roller skates.
Talking of booby traps, if Archibald has arrived in the next room, is he?
Oh, I suppose so. That's where he was to be. Why?
Well, because I made him an apple pie bed.
Oh, it was the right spirit. Oh, I wish I'd thought of it myself.
Oh, too late now.
Oh, yes, but I'll tell you what I can and will do. Now, you say you object to Lysander snoring. Well, I'll go and pop him in at Archie Mulliner's window, and then that'll give him pause for thought.
Splendid! Well, good night.
Good night. And then was the sound of a door closing.
There was. I have indicated not much of my nephew Archibald's mind, but there was what there was of it now was in a whirl. He was stunned. Large though his ears were, he could hardly believe them. Like every man who's abruptly called upon to revise his entire scheme of values, he felt as if he had been standing on the top of the Eiffel Tower and some practical joker had suddenly drawn it away from under him. Tottering back to his room, he replaced the cake of soap in its dish and sat down on the bed to grapple with this amazing development. Aurelia Cammerley had compared herself to Cleopatra. It is not too much to say that my nephew Archibald's emotions at this juncture were very similar to Mark Antony's. Would it have been Egypt's queen risen from her throne at his entry and, without a word of warning, started to dance the black bottom?
He was roused from his thoughts by the sound of light footsteps on the balcony, and at the same time he heard a low, woofly gruffle, the unmistakable note of a bulldog of regular habits who has been jerked out of his basket in the small hours and forced to take the night air.
She is coming, my own, my sweet. Were it never so airy a tread, my heart would hear her and beat. Were it earth in an earthly bed.
He rose from his seat, and he paused for a moment, irresolute. The aspiration descended on him. He knew what he must do. Yes, gentlemen, in that supreme crisis of his life, with his whole fate hanging, as you might say, in the balance, Archibald Mulliner, showing for almost the first time in his career well-nigh human intelligence, began to give his celebrated imitation of a hen laying an egg. Archibald's imitation of a hen laying an egg was considered on broad and sympathetic lines. Less violent than Salvini's Othello, it had been in something of the poignant wistful of Mrs. Siddons in the sleepwalking scenes of Macbeth. The rendition started quietly, almost inaudibly, with a sort of soft, liquid crooning, the joyful yet half incredulous murmur of a mother who can scarcely believe as yet that her union has really been blessed, and that it is indeed she who is responsible for that oval mixture of a chalk and albumum which she sees lying beside her in the straw. Then gradually conviction comes.
It looked like an egg. It feels like an egg. It's shaped like an egg. Nubby, it is an egg.
And at that, all doubting resolve, the crooning changes, takes on a firmer note, soars into the upper register, and finally swells into a maternal paean of joy. Of such a caliber that few had ever been able to listen to it dry-eyed. Following which, it was Archibald's custom to run around the room, flapping the sides of his coat, and then leaping onto a sofa or some convenient chair to stand there with his arms at right angles, crowing himself purple in the face. All these things he had done many, many a time for the idle entertainment of fellow members in the smoking room of the Drones Club. But never with the gusto, the brio with which he performed them now. Essentially,
Essentially a modest man, like all Moliners, he was compelled nevertheless to recognize that tonight he was surpassing himself. Every artist knows when the authentic divine fire is within him, and an inner voice told Archibald Moliner that he was at the top of his form and giving the performance of a lifetime. Love thrilled through every that he uttered, animated each flap of his arms. Indeed, so deeply did love drive in its spur that he tells us that instead of the customary once, he actually made the circle of the room 3 times before coming to roost on top of the chest of drawers.
When at length he did so, he glanced towards the window and saw that through the curtains the loveliest face in the world was peering. And in Aurelia Camerlet's glorious eyes there was a look he had never seen before, a look of worship. There was a long silence. Then she spoke.
Do it again!
And Archibald did it again. He did it 4 times, and he could, he tells me, if he had pleased, taken a 5th encore. Or at any rate, a couple of bows. And then, leaping lightly to the floor, he advanced towards her. He felt conquering, dominant. It was his hour. He reached out and clasped her in his...
Oh, Aurelia, old girl, you are the bee's roller skates.
And at that, she seemed to melt into his embrace. Her lovely face was raised to his.
Archibald.
Oh, Archibald.
There was another throbbing silence, broken only by the beating of 2 hearts and the wheezing of the bulldog, who seemed to suffer a good deal in his bronchial tubes. Then Archibald released her.
Well, that's that. Glad everything's all settled in hotsy-totsy. Gosh, I wish I had a cigarette. This is the sort of moment a bloke needs one.
I didn't know you smoked.
Oh, yes, I do.
And you drink as well.
Quite as well. In fact, rather better. Oh, by the way,
Yes?
there's just one thing. Suppose that aunt of yours wants to come and visit us when we are settled down in our little nest. And what, dearest, would be your reaction to the scheme of soaking her on the base of the skull with a stuffed eel skin?
Oh, I should like that most of all.
Ooh, twin souls. That's what we are. When you come right down to it, I suspected it all along. And now I know, 2 jolly old twin souls. And now, let us pop downstairs and put this bulldog in the butler's pantry, where he will come upon it unexpectedly in the morning and doubtless get a shock, which will do him as much good as a week at the seaside. Are you on?
I am.
And hand in hand, they wandered out together onto the broad staircase.
Okay, off we go.